Hello and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I sincerely hope that you and your close ones are doing as well as possible in this difficult time. I am Pierre-Marie Bavel, Head of Connectivity for Europe, and I thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar, which is dedicated to sharing various approaches and experiences to manage your infrastructure during major disruptions. Today, we will specifically focus on, first, how to raise awareness amongst remote workers at a time where cyber threats are increasing and employees potentially more vulnerable, with Charles van der Veld, who is Head of Research at Orange Cyberdefence. We will then look at how to enable elasticity in your remote access infrastructure with Laurent Lacroix, who heads up Orange Cyberdefence in Europe. And last, but certainly not least, how to better understand the usage of your remote workers to both manage their behavior, but also adapt your IT infrastructure. And this will be covered with or by Sodio Gamero, who is Head of Application Performance Management Consulting for Orange Business Services here in Europe. If you have any question, please type them in the tool, and we will come to them at the end or after the three presenters have gone through their slides. So without further ado, I will hand over to Charles van der Veld, who is Head of Security Research at Orange Cyberdefence. Charles, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I greet you from lockdown in Cape Town, South Africa. I trust you're all doing well. My task here today is to share with you a summary of the findings of a recent report we published last week on the security implications of the current pandemic, the cybersecurity implications. I'll be giving you a link to the report at the end of my presentation. So if you have interest in what we've been saying and you'd like to read more, that will be available there. I want to start just by reminding everyone something that I think we all understand, but is a very powerful reality, which is that according to data released by Statista late last week, as of this time, approximately 1/3 of the entire planet is under lockdown. And this current pandemic is unprecedented in many ways, but this reality perhaps has the biggest implications for IT and my area in particular, which is cybersecurity. So what this has meant for businesses and particularly for security leaders and security managers is the following combination of factors. Firstly, for many businesses, there's been a demand to adapt extremely rapidly. In some cases, we've had only days and even hours of notice of a lockdown, and businesses have had to scramble to figure out how they continue working in that new reality. Workers themselves, of course, have had to learn how to work and collaborate remotely. In some cases, in jobs where it was previously believed that remote work simply wasn't feasible, now everyone has to do it, and just about overnight. IT and security managers now have to protect these users where they sit on their home networks, far away from the safe and secure perimeter of their corporate IT infrastructure. And they've had to respond to an elevated level of threat, as I will illustrate you with just a couple of examples in a few minutes. And finally, they've had to do all of this with less themselves, because they're also working from home. They also don't have their regular systems and access. They're also dealing with children and pets and home internet, etc. So that's the reality that IT security managers are having to deal with right now. So what this means, or how we're reading the cybersecurity situation at the moment, really flows directly from that. The first thing we're seeing is that users themselves are more susceptible, they're more vulnerable, and that's mostly a psychological thing, because they're hungry for information, they're feeling generally anxious, anxious to connect with other people, to learn more. So they're generally more susceptible to many forms of cyber attack. They're also often having to use platforms and technologies that they weren't familiar with before, that they don't understand well, and are therefore more vulnerable on. Attackers, on the other hand, have pivoted very dramatically to exploit this new reality, taking advantage of this anxiety, taking advantage of users' increased levels of vulnerability. The sort of cyber underground has always been remarkably agile and adaptive, but in this particular crisis, they've really outdone themselves in how quickly they've moved to exploit the pandemic. As I pointed out earlier, home IT, the systems that users are now being forced to work from, are generally less secure or not known to be secure. And that's everything from users using their own mobile phones or home PCs to the remote, to the broadband routers and Wi-Fi access points that those users are using, all generally not as secure as you would expect in a corporate environment. Obviously, one of the things that has to happen in order to accommodate those remote workers is that we need remote access. And those technologies, remote access technologies, were increasingly a target before the crisis hit, but are even more a target now. And we've seen several examples of them being targeted and exploited. And of course, as more and more businesses install and implement more and more remote access, the more of a problem that becomes. And then finally, we're seeing that health systems and health data are targets also. So just two examples very quickly. This is what we call a watering hole attack. It's a fake version of a COVID traffic tracking website. This version is available for sale on the Russian-speaking black market, and it can be hosted on any site, and when a user visits it, they get downloaded with a version of the Danabot malware. This is a very good example of hackers exploiting the current crisis to distribute malware. In our own operations, our CERT is reporting also a remarkable increase in the volume of malicious emails that they're analyzing and responding to. Those figures there show you the volume of emails that were presented to us by customers for analysis over 2 consecutive weeks, the week of the 23rd being the week that we published our paper. And as you can see there, the number of malicious emails that we detected from within those volumes was 4 than in the week before. So the challenges then, in summary, as we've said, your users are more vulnerable. You have less control over the endpoints that those users are using, less visibility, less ability to patch, less ability to monitor. Your users may be connecting from systems and environments that are not as secure as you would like. You may have been forced to rush to implement or to scale out your remote access systems, perhaps not doing them as well as you would have liked. And finally, you and your team would be operating probably with some constraints yourselves, because you're working remotely, because you have to deal with family issues, and because you or your team may also fall ill or have loved ones who fall ill. So how to respond? Well, we offer the following high-level guidance in our paper. The first thing we're saying to people is don't panic. If your security is not what you'd like it to be at this time, it doesn't have to stay there. We're encouraging people to work incrementally to improve security. In this current context, every improvement makes a difference. So even small wins are wins. Next, we're encouraging users to think about the worst case scenario, which in cyber terms would be a breach or a compromise. As we've said, we think breaches and compromises are more likely, and our ability to respond to those breaches is going to be constrained by the lockdown reality. So that's something that needs to be revisited and rethought about in this context. We encourage people to talk with their users. More than ever, users are the first line of defense from a cybersecurity point of view at this time. And just providing them with rational, balanced, level-minded information that they can use to assess the risks for themselves and to make smart decisions, I think, is a very valuable effort right now. And then we're encouraging people to really form communities and collaborate. Stay in touch with providers like ourselves, but also stay in touch with your suppliers, stay in touch with your contractors, and stay in touch even with your competitors. This is a time for working together, and cybersecurity is no different. So we really are encouraging people to reach out and form communities that can think rationally and collaborate from a security point of view. And finally, we're encouraging people to identify and work on a set of cybersecurity priorities. And I must apologize, this slide hasn't rendered quite as we would have hoped. But in the paper, we outlined 10 priority areas, which we discuss in some detail. I just want to draw your eye, if I may, to just a very small number of them, which I think will then lead nicely into the rest of our presentations today. The first is, as I've already mentioned, to establish incident response procedures and systems, considering the reality that breaches are more likely and our response is going to be constrained. Secondly, we're encouraging people really to think about backup and disaster recovery at this time. Ransomware and extortion attacks are a real risk. Backup is more challenging with users off-site. Obviously, we need to provide secure remote access, probably more than before, possibly with multiple redundant paths. So that's certainly something people need to think about. We need to think about how we reestablish visibility over the remote endpoints, both for security, vulnerability monitoring, attack detection, but also just performance, systems health, application performance, etc. And then finally, from that list, we need to think about how we reinforce patching and hardening of those remote endpoints that are no longer on our corporate networks. So folks, that's all I'm going to have time for today, but as I mentioned, we have extensive publications available from our website. Please take a time to download them, send us any questions or comments that you might have. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Laurent.
Thank you, Charles. That was very, very insightful. Hello everyone. So my name is Laurent Lacroix, and I'm speaking to you from my home office here in Belgium. And the outbreak of COVID-19 prompted many employers to shift to a remote work model for all employees possible, and a bit to limit the spread of the coronavirus. The ability for many workers to perform their job duties entirely from home can help protect both the public health and the continued success of the business. However, what most companies have realized is that neither their current remote access solution nor their business continuity plan was designed to face a global crisis affecting all employees at the same time. So to give you an idea, among Orange Business Services customers, the number of users connecting to their company's network remotely has already increased by 700%. So what I'd like to share with you today are some of the lessons learned and best practices that we've gathered over the past few weeks in helping our customers swiftly enable enterprise remote access at scale. So first of all, you should make the most out of your current remote access infrastructure, starting by increasing the number of licenses. So typically on remote access solutions, this corresponds to the number of concurrent users that can connect at the same time on the appliance. And there are two options you should consider, depending on the amount of users you have and that needs to connect across your company, and how long you think you will need this increase, which obviously can hardly be estimated at this stage. The first option is that most vendors propose what they call emergency licenses. So these are licenses that can be activated on a device to increase the license count to match the number of maximum connections that the hardware supports, plus 10%. So this allows to provide an immediate response to a sudden demand of concurrent users for emergencies, which is exactly what we need here. However, note that such license can remain enabled for only 8 weeks at one time, and then needs to be renewed. And also, these licenses are quite expensive. So the alternative is potentially to go for perpetual licenses, which are more the standard license, in case you don't need the full capacity of the appliance, or you expect the situation will actually not go beyond, or the situation will actually be required beyond 8 weeks. And what we recommend, obviously, is you should carefully assess the cost of both options, noting that in our experience, most of our customers in the past weeks have actually opted for, I would say, more mid-term and perpetual licenses for at least a 12-month term, just to be on the safe side. If you're short of a few connections, you can also consider leveraging your existing firewall infrastructure and appliances, as they usually also integrate the remote access function. So this is also what we have done for some of our customers, activating and leveraging their firewall to connect a few users. Although the solution do not scale to the same capacity as dedicated remote access gateway would do. Beyond acquiring the necessary VPN licenses, you also need to increase as much as possible the business internet connection that is facing your remote access gateway, as well as the backend connectivity to your private network to access your corporate applications. But that could take time, and you may not be able to expand to a level needed by the business and in time scales required to immediately remedy your remote working challenges. This depends heavily on the access layer, whether you have lead lines, which typically takes weeks, or if you have existing Ethernet or fiber, obviously through a software change you can quickly do or perform bandwidth upgrades. So in case you are facing bandwidth issues, and Fenner will go probably more at length on this topic, but you should certainly consider optimizing the usage of the existing bandwidth by first limiting recreational traffic for going through your corporate network. So you can actually limit using functionalities such as bandwidth control or rate limiting certain type of traffic, typically social networks, YouTube, etc., which are heavy bandwidth having bandwidth consumption. If need be, you could actually decide to offload completely this recreational traffic by activating a function that is called split tunneling. So what that function does, it actually modifies the routes on the VPN clients on the endpoints, so the traffic meant for the corporate intranet networks flow through the tunnel, and then all other traffic goes straight to the internet. However, beware in this case, you are bypassing your corporate secure internet gateways, so potentially exposing the endpoints to some additional threats. So as mentioned by Charles, make sure you further harden your endpoints and potentially complement your endpoint solution with an endpoint detection and response solution, or leverage on cloud-based internet gateways to protect the web browsing activities of the end user. You can also consider an endpoint posture assessment, which most remote access solutions allow, which is basically to do an endpoint check, like, does it run the latest antivirus update, for instance, does it have the latest patch, before allowing the endpoint to connect to your corporate network. Last but not least, it's all about onboarding new users. There are some employees' profile that might never have worked from home before. And as Charles mentioned, we were given only a couple of days or a few hours to put things in place, meaning that for IT teams, it was potentially difficult to roll out and push VPN clients to all users. So make sure that indeed you have your process and governance in place to install the VPN clients remotely. Also make sure you provide the end user with guidance on how to download or configure the VPN clients. And if you're using multi-factor authentication, obviously preference goes to the use of soft token for rapid deployment. And we actually have realized on some of our customers that some users actually never installed or never enabled their soft token, so we had to do this in emergency. And last but not least, finally communicate and deliver an end user awareness training about the remote access usage and behavior policies of your company. So clearly highlighting what is allowed and what is not. So even after going through all of these steps, you might still be facing capacity issues due to the limitations inherent to hardware-based solutions. We have actually encountered this situation on several of our large global enterprise customers. So how can we tackle the challenge of scaling up on a short term and with flexible terms and conditions, allowing to scale down and not incur unnecessary costs once the crisis is over and employees are back to the office? So the Orange teams actually came up with an approach combining security, network, and cloud solutions to deliver on this challenge, leveraging the elasticity and scalability benefits of the cloud by deploying virtual remote access gateways. And for this solution, there are a number of prerequisites. The first one is that you need to have a tenant in a public cloud. So we have successfully deployed this solution on Azure, AWS, or on Orange Flexible Engine, which is the Orange public cloud offering. Second, you need a directory. So either Active Directory, LDAP, Radius, which is used for the user provisioning and also basic authentication. But here again, and as I mentioned previously, we strongly advise to use or to complement that with multi-factor authentication solution. And last but not least, you need a secure link between your public cloud tenants and your enterprise private network. So you will have to subscribe to that option on the public cloud platform, and obviously with your service provider. And typically at Orange we have, a GARI offer, which is, where we have direct peering with most cloud service providers, so we can manage that solution end to end. So the benefits of these solutions are, first of all, the ability to combine both physical and virtual gateways in the same solution and manage them through a single portal or interface. A second benefit is that you can actually set up several virtual gateways to increase the capacity as you require it. Also, it actually was very quick to deploy, so we were able to deploy the solution in 5 days. And obviously, thanks to the fact that we've been piloting this solution for a customer since the end of last year, so we already gathered quite some experience on this type of solution. Another benefit is that you don't need no long-term, there's no long-term commitment to it. So what we've seen is that you have a minimum term of 1 month, which allows you to see how things will evolve and then adapt accordingly. And last but not least, it delivers a seamless end-user experience. The thing is that it uses the same VPN clients that your employees are used to. And for us, this was and for our customers, this was the main driver for deploying this solution over some more recent cloud-native remote access solution, as the customers' IT teams did not want to start deploying again a new client or a new solution on an endpoint under such lockdown circumstances. However, the crisis also accelerated the deployment of the cloud-native solutions I mentioned about. For those customers, we had been piloting this before the crisis. Some of the lessons learned. The first thing is that it's been requiring really a good communication and coordination between the customer teams, the Orange teams, and the third party, managing the tenants or the application landscape on the customer side. Another lesson learned is that we realized that some of these virtual remote gateway solutions are not available in AWS or Azure marketplace in China, for instance. So there are some limitations there. And then some of our clients actually alerted us on the fact that they were facing capacity issues on Azure in the past weeks. So everyone, I think, at that point realized that cloud computing capacity is not infinite, as the industry as a whole experiences new strains caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think this highlights once again the importance of having a multi-cloud approach. So in the end, for these customers, we deployed that virtual remote access solution on several public cloud tenants, so typically Azure and AWS and the Orange public cloud offering. So what I've described in the previous slide is based on actual implementations we have performed for some of our customers, some of them with more than 100,000 employees, such as the use case that is depicted here. So just taking this one as an example, so we've done this for a large industrial manufacturing company, which activity spans across industry, energy, healthcare, infrastructure, and smart cities. And they have employees and operations in more than 150 countries, though they're headquartered in Europe. So for them, obviously, following the spread of the COVID-19 virus and the various lockdown measures taken by the various countries, they had to ensure business continuity for the employees, allowing them to work remotely, allowing them to continue to access their critical applications in order for them to ability continue with their business. So how we've helped there? So in 5 days, the Orange teams upgraded the customer's capacity to 72,000 simultaneous remote users. And before the crisis, they were actually ranging between 25,000 and 30,000 concurrent users. And that solution is covering all regions, so the Americas, EMEA, and APAC regions. To do so, we have upgraded the number of licenses on their existing physical appliances to their maximum capacity. So we went up to 52,000 concurrent users there. So that's an increase of 25,000 concurrent licenses there. And to complement that, following the solution I depicted just previously, we have implemented 4 virtual remote access gateways on Azure for a total of an additional 22,000 concurrent users. And we've also now set in place standard processes and governance to deploy additional virtual gateways if those are required in the future. So the final note, I would say that I'd like to point out the fact that remote work was already on the increase all around the world before the COVID-19 outbreak, in a trend that was showing no signs of slowing down. Therefore, the investments you might have to make today in solutions that support remote work are, I think, sustainable, as it has, for instance, a positive impact on employees' mobility and can contribute to the ecological transition. Nevertheless, the solution as depicted today, based on virtual gateways in public cloud, is future-proof, providing you with the ability to scale capacity up or down, combined with flexible commercial terms. And with that, I'd like to thank you, and I would like to hand over to Sonia, who is going now to focus on end-user experience and application performance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent, and good afternoon to all. So today I'm talking to you from my home office close to Geneva in Switzerland, and I'm happy to bring the visibility topic to you today. So to introduce the topic, I will do it with a general statement which actually applies at any time, which is that you can only manage what you can see. So without proper monitoring and visibility, you're actually blind to manage what you are really mandated to manage. So today I'd like to show you what kind of monitoring can help you better manage business continuity during a global disruption like the one we're living today. So moving ahead, what is the new situation as already described by Laurent and Charles? So the majority of the workforce needs to work from home. So this is really the new situation that we all need to face today. So it means also that the company on-branch monitoring tools do not work anymore. So typically if you use NetFlow on your branches or synthetic monitoring or packet collection in your branches, this visibility will no longer be useful to you. The only possible data capture point which will bring you really meaningful data is the user endpoint. And this needs to be accessible. This data needs to be accessible to you whether the user is connected through VPN or not. So meaning that the collector of this monitoring solution needs to be hosted on the internet. So we are changing really the perspective of where the monitoring should be made from. So having the majority of your workforce working from home brings new challenges, and these are summarized here. So first of all, it's the availability of specific IT resources, which may not be, of course, the same as what usually users use when they're working from the offices. New security threats, also as well as covered by Charles, and again, the performance while working from home. So what are the specific challenges for each of these, let's say, bricks? In terms of availability of specific IT resources, so of course VPN, one of the most important ones, and this was already covered by Laurent, and also, of course, collaboration applications. So Zoom, WebEx, Skype, etc. All the users are now using massively these applications, and you need to guarantee that they are available at all times. In terms of security threats, we also discussed this also with Charles, so shadow IT, the fact that people are actually trying to use applications which are probably not the corporate applications, phishing, etc. These are the new security threats. And in terms of performance, the main challenge is that the IT organizations don't have control on home connectivity. And this is a big challenge namely for IT support. And also, on-prem applications may have a performance which is degraded with respect to when accessing those applications from the office. So trying to understand what's that impact on the on-prem applications while working from home, it's also a challenge for IT organizations in the new situation. So how does end-user experience monitoring help? This is what we call this kind of visibility and monitoring solutions, either digital user experience or end-user experience monitoring tools. So they provide actionable data which enables IT organizations to better manage this disruption. So we find again our three bricks: availability of specific IT resources, new security threats, and the performance while working from home. And I will address for each one of these challenges what are the kinds of questions that these end-user experience monitoring solutions answer to, and what are actually the benefits and the actions that it allows the IT organizations to perform. So in terms of availability, these kind of tools, they answer to the questions, so how is my VPN being used today? Do I have failures? Do I have errors per region? Am I sure that my users are connecting to the right VPN gateway corresponding to the region they're in, or to the less congestion VPN gateway? So this allows for enhanced VPN capacity management. Most of the data is also available from the VPN solutions themselves, but this provides a different perspective, which is the user perspective. When is the user really getting this failure? And if he's actually contacting the IT support to open an incident on this, we can see that from the user perspective. Then the other example, the collaboration applications, so availability, we will see that as well from the end user perspective. How are they behaving? Are they available all the time? And if we have issues, we can quickly react on these issues and understand where they come from. If I look into the security threats, we will exactly know what are the applications which users are using at any time and how are they using it. So for example, if we think about Skype for Business, I will be able to know whether they're using video or only voice and screen sharing. How is patching done? So patching, of course, is a very, very important brick into ensuring the security of the endpoints. We can realize that our patching process is not optimal. Maybe we're sending the patches during business day when our VPN gateways are congestion, and this is not the thing to do. So we can adjust the process and make sure that it's really running at the optimal level and that all the patching processes are completed in due time. So this allows and enables IT organizations to enforce the compliance that they want to, apply to the users. It allows them as well to manage shadow IT, understand exactly what are the applications that the users are using, and not only based on the fact that they have installed an application or a binary, also whether they're using them from browsers, which is something which is less easy for, so typically SCCM, LAN desk applications to monitor, and also optimizing this patching process, as I said before. In terms of performance while working from home, so this is really where these solutions help the most, I would say. So what is the performance per employee and per application? So really a complete, full visibility on what are the users using in terms of applications, but as well, what is the performance and what is the experience that they're having on those. If they have issues, where do performance issues come from? So being able to diagnose and to distinguish between end-user issues, Wi-Fi issues, bottlenecks on the bandwidth, on the homework connectivity, the VPN, is that a bottleneck, or the end applications, whether they're SaaS or whether they are on-prem, understanding where the performance issues come from. And we can see this with these tools. How is application performance from VPN versus on-site or versus when accessing the application via split tunneling, as Laurent explained, typically for SaaS-based applications? So understanding the differences between these different ways of connecting to applications can allow IT organizations to optimize the infrastructure accordingly to make sure that we deliver the best experience possible to end users at all times, independently from the way they are connecting to those applications. So on the enablement side of things, so the enablement for the IT support teams is huge because both on the diagnosis of the issue, so understanding where the problems come from, and as well on the prioritization of the incidents, so making sure that we put the right focus on the incidents which impact the largest amount of users. This, of course, optimizes the time of the IT support organization. Then optimizing also on-prem applications for remote access, because we can realize maybe that some applications are particularly chatty, and there are some components of the applications, if we can of course have control on the code, if they're on-prem, that we can optimize in order for the remote access to have a better experience for the user. And at the end of the day, the idea is to communicate relevant guidelines to the users based on what they're actually doing, and not only based on guessing or what we think that they're doing, but we're not really sure. And even adapting what we're saying depending on regions, on countries, because the usage of applications may be different from one population of employees to another. So in order to make all of this more concrete, I have gathered a couple of dashboard examples from some of these end user experience or digital user experience monitoring tools, so that you see concretely what this actually means in terms of dashboards. So this is a simple dashboard on the VPN usage. So you have the different ways of connecting to applications. So on-site users, people still in the office, VPN connected users, or users off-site or connecting to applications through split tunneling. And we see here the VPN usage, and of course we see a huge increase on the VPN users and a huge decrease on the Office users, starting of course in the beginning of March. So this is a kind of dashboard that we can get. Another example, for example, for Zoom, which of course has been a big focus in the last weeks, and namely concerning the vulnerability of Zoom. So we can see the usage of Zoom, we can see the performance of Zoom for the users versus other collaboration applications like WebEx, Skype, etc. So we can have all that information, and we can see exactly who is using Zoom. So if you have enforced to your employees and you have told them, please do not use Zoom because there are security vulnerabilities, you would still be able to detect who is using Zoom, namely from a browser. The next example is about Office 365. So we are comparing here, and it's probably a bit small, but we're comparing the performance of Office 365 from the office versus while connected on VPN. And the first one is in February and the second one was in March. So we see that in February most of the people were still in the office and we had a specific performance, and then in March most of the people were connected through VPN, and we have a different performance which is actually degraded. So we can see that Office 365 is slower through VPN. So we see 33 seconds for OneDrive, a specific OneDrive application on Office 365, and we see that was 25 seconds while in the office. So we can actually quantify the loss in productivity due to the users being connected from home. We also see, because we have access to the server response time of Office 365, of course they're not connecting to the same servers, and we see that the servers that are used through VPN and in March are actually slower than the ones that were used from the offices in February. So it can also be due to the fact that the servers are more overloaded. Maybe the applications are more used by the users, and then there is some overload on the Microsoft side. So you have this kind of understanding what's the impact on performance, what's the impact on the productivity of my employees. Last but not least, an example of a home connectivity performance dashboard. So here we see a very simplified diagram on what a user is connecting from and to. So we see the computer, we see that the computer is connected on Wi-Fi, and here we see that the Wi-Fi quality is actually not very good. It's 64%. Then we also see the router of the home, let's say, connectivity, And this is a very interesting perspective because we all have the experience that when working from home, we might have other family members which are either watching films on Netflix or following some remote schooling digital platforms. And this can actually provoke or have congestion in your home connectivity. So if we have congestion in the home connectivity, we will see packet loss and latency increasing at the level of that router. We would also be able to see how the VPN on the other side is behaving and what would be the end server performance like as well. So this, of course, is really key for the IT support organizations to diagnose performance issues in the home connectivity, which is something totally out of the control of IT. And this was my last dashboard example, and that's actually the end of my presentation. And Pierre-Marie, I hand it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you, Laurent and Charles, for your presentation. We try to keep the information flow short. If you have any questions that we can answer in the next 10 minutes, feel free to type them into your BrightTalk interface. I'm not sure, Katie, can we also take live questions, or do they have to be typed?
No, if they type them in. So there is one there now that we've got covered here.
Yes.
So how do you mitigate the inherent security concerns when enabling split tunneling? And I think, Laurent, are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, when activating this split tunneling function, it means that everything going through the internet is no longer going through your centralized or regional secure internet gateways, where typically you are having your proxy filtering all traffic. So there are basically two options there. Either you really rely on the endpoint, and obviously you need to harden any further the endpoint, or also deploy potentially additional solutions like endpoint detection and response. The other approach we've also seen with some of our customers is obviously to implement cloud-based internet gateways or secure internet gateways, whereby obviously the web browsing traffic goes to these solutions to be filtered, to analyze any malwares, etc., in order to protect the users as if they were in the office. And I think these solutions are very relevant because even though you do not activate split tunneling, your employees might not always be connected to your VPN and to your corporate environment. They might be using their corporate laptops for other use now that they're locked down at home, and also maybe for their kids to follow some classes from school remotely. So they might be anyway bypassing this. So having this solution in place to make sure they can safely go to the internet and browse the internet makes a lot of sense.
I might be able to add to that, Laurent, in terms of the specific threats that become visible because of split tunneling. I think one small configuration setting that can make a huge difference is to use the VPN software to ensure that the user is using the corporate DNS at least. So you want to avoid a situation where the home user is getting their DNS resolved by their broadband router or Wi-Fi AP, and ensure that they're getting their DNS resolved by the corporate DNS server. And that can usually be done via a configuration setting in the VPN software.
Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Charles. We have another question. Are we seeing any cyber attacks emerge in the light of organizations' current vulnerability, where they have had to rapidly get users working from home? Charles, maybe a question for you?
Yeah, I can comment on that. I'm not aware of attacks that can be directly linked to the fact that corporates had to rapidly get users working from home. What I can say is it's very clear that some threat actors like the APT group, APT 41, which is a state-backed group, has been targeting remote access technologies and has been targeting them very specifically during this time. Now, what we don't know for sure is whether they would have been targeting those technologies now anyway. You know, despite the crisis, we can't make that correlation. But there's definitely evidence that remote access type technologies, VPN endpoints, application gateways, etc., are being targeted and exploited at this time.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Any other question from the audience? Okay, we have one more. So it's more a comment. Good point about DNS whilst using split tunneling. Thank you. To expand on that, we could use OpenDNS or Umbrella to make it more secure. Laurent, maybe a view on this?
Yeah, this is part of the cloud-based solutions I was referring to. So some are indeed based on DNS primarily as a first line of defense, I would say. But some others, go further in terms of deep packet inspection and of the whole traffic.
Okay.
The good point about DNS-based solution is that it can be really deployed very, very swiftly.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Laurent. Any additional question in the audience? We have another 3 minutes to go on the scheduled time. So probably time for one more question. Okay, so probably no more question. I hope you have found this webinar insightful. We try to share some of the best practices that we have seen from our customers and examples of realization in the last few weeks that we have implemented. We also try to share with Charles or raise or give you tips to raise the awareness on the cyber risks that are out there at the moment, which are very much linked with the current situation that we are experiencing. Although, of course, all of these guidelines can certainly be used in normal circumstances, I should say. And last but not least, we've tried to share with you how you could extend your corporate environment to the remote offices of your workers or the office of your remote workers to ensure that the experience they are having accessing your IT infrastructure is somewhat at par with the environment they have in the office. If you have any additional questions which you would like to ask, please feel free to reach out to your account managers or your account teams or any of us. The details should be shared also with you as part of the publication of this webinar. I thank you very much for your time for today and wish you a good rest of the week. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.